Hey, this is Lane from LainTCG, and I'm here today for a pretty quick video on the ban list and my meta predictions for this format, now that we have the ban list and know that it's going to be going into effect in the global meta on the 31st, same as with JP. I was going to release a deck profile this week, but unfortunately, because the ban list was going to come down the day after I normally post, I figured it'd probably be best to wait. So I'll have that video out this next Thursday as normal, maybe a bit earlier in the week, but we'll see. And I figured I'd make a little tier list towards the end here for you on what I think is going to be good for the next, you know, few weeks after the ban list before the next set, though I imagine most everything will still be valid during next set because next set doesn't have any huge splashes. So yeah, we'll get into the rest of it, and I'll just go over my thoughts on each of the things that were banned or unlimited. And this is a section that's new for my videos. I figured for everybody's sake on my longer videos, I'd just do a section with timestamps for points of interest so that you can just see what you want to see. I know for a lot of the like meta prediction things or for tier list stuff, people are just looking for that. If you want to stick around for everything else, then that's fine. I would greatly appreciate that. But yeah, go to what you feel like or hop around if you want. Should be good to go. Yeah, and we'll get into the rest of it now. So, Ukon was limited. Everybody wanted it to be, so it's not hugely surprising. So basically, uh, it being limited seems to be the reason why most people are pretty satisfied with this ban list. It's also the reason why I'm pretty satisfied with the ban list for the most part. The reasoning that they gave for the ban is fairly accurate. Promo Ukon had an outsized effect on the game compared to other cards because your ability to use it in combination with the search Ukon was a lot of what determined whether your deck was top tier or not in the global and the JP formats. Hybrid decks and Numon that don't actually need level 3s to function could just run 8 Ukomons and speed out aggression and strategies that otherwise take time to set up. It made control decks that needed didn't need a level 3 to be a lot stronger than it would be normally, Numemon specifically, but also the hybrids don't really need the level 3s for anything other than searching. And the new search Ukomon is basically the best at that in the game, and it happens regularly. And then the promo just gives you more memory to set up your plays. All of the other decks can't abuse the promo one in the same ways that the hybrid decks and Numemon can, though. So it specifically is unfair, and limiting it to one makes sense. All of those decks are still going to run 5 Ukos because, they're still good, and it's going to be a relevant card no matter what, but you won't be seeing the one that gains memory nearly as often, and it's not just going to be a matter of course that they open with like multiple Ukomons in their hand that they can do the rush out strategy, so they're going to have to actually set up their game plan instead of just rushing you down with Ukon. The Numemon deck is no longer going to be Ukomon.deck, and the hybrid deck will actually have to do a bit more work to set up its plays. So it's good overall, and I'm pretty happy to see the limit. Also, Louis, Ukomon's partner. Honestly, he might as well be a hybrid, but I'll get into that. So basically, I wasn't expecting it to be hit. Most people in the global meta weren't expecting it to be hit, and a lot of the people that I see who make videos on, the Japanese meta also weren't really expecting it. But it wasn't on my radar because I was not really aware of what Gabu Bond does in JP. But after looking at that deck, it really makes sense. So for 3 cost, you promote a Digimon from the breeding area to the field, and then when a Digimon promotes, you tap him to gain 1, so he effectively plays for 2 no matter what. And then if you have an Ukomon in raising, you can hatch, gain whatever other effect, so either the search or 1 memory back. And if you have the promo, he plays for one, and with Gabubon's like Mat Tamer from BT6, you also effectively play him for one and draw a card, and that Mat isn't once per turn. So if you stack Louis, you're just paying one to draw a card and also rush out rookies in a deck that's made to rookie rush, which is pretty oppressive, honestly. His biggest use in the global meta at the moment, though, other than for speeding things up with the like Ukon Man rush, was for a pseudo like hybrid play, which is why that he might as well be one. Because when a Digimon's promoted from the breeding area, if you aren't aware, it can immediately attack. It's not affected by in Magic, we call it summoning sickness, but Digimon in the breeding area aren't affected by summoning sickness, so they can attack immediately when you push them out. Um, which, for the Numon deck that I played for the longest time, cinched me the game more often than not when I had to play. And also for like a lot of other decks, it's just a pretty good play in general. The hit makes sense and contributes to some potential easing up of Digimon Emperor in the game. I predict people are still going to be using it because it will probably be even more oppressive if you can't get a rookie out at all and you don't have any of the memory easing from the promo and the Louis. But people will probably stop running it in as high numbers as before and contribute more to like the game plan of their deck. So it's a good hit. We'll see if it actually creates a big impact on specifically Digimon Emperor, which is one of the reasons it seems like they brought up in their post. But time will tell. So this is the one that nobody expected. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't see a single prediction with Hammerspark on, but yeah, it seems to have been eliminated at least for two reasons, as far as I can see. The first is to prevent feels bad kind of plays. The reason that they gave was the amount of acceleration that it can give decks that have multiple in hand, and that you can gain memory with no downsides versus any deck that can't. And it just makes blue have more memory acceleration than like any other color, because at least with Blinding Ray you have a technical cost. Even if you don't have a security to pay the cost exists. And then with Gravity Crush for red, you will lose all of that memory at the end of your turn if you don't cinch the game exactly that turn. So you can end up putting your opponent to like 6 or 8 or 10. Whereas Hammerspark is just free, gain 1, and that's it. Uh, I honestly suspect the second, though, is that blue, aside from Gabumon, because Gabumon got hit pretty hard with the Louis and the Ukomans, that blue is in an extremely good spot after this ban list. And it's going to take over a lot of the meta after this ban list because Magna X, spoilers, is going to be really good still with the blue base. And also in the JP meta, people are running a lot of Mirage and other things and everything else. People were expecting some kind of Mirage hit as well in some predictions. So blue is going to take over the meta a bit after this ban list. So, I think that one of the reasons is they wanted to preemptively limit the excess acceleration that blue decks have, because blue already has a lot of memory acceleration for not very much. And they wanted to slow down a big meta problem before it happened to keep the game in a somewhat healthy state. But we'll see if that actually contributes to that going forward. It's hard to say. So, Awakening. This is primarily a hit for vaccine armor, but it will affect the blue base version as well. Awakening of the Golden Knight for 3. You digivolve a Digimon with armor form and its traits into something with Magnamon in its name. Awakening in combination with Patamon or the many reduction VMons that you can get onto the play. You can get into your boss monster for effectively 2 to 5 memory. So for Patamon, when you digivolve into something in security, you gain a memory back as well. And if you have a TK, you gain another memory. But that effectively makes going into Magnamon 2, because you gain 1 off of the Patamon inherit, and then you go into this for 3. So you go into your giant unaffected boss monster for 2, and then Vmon has the promos and also the new blue-red Vmon that will gain you a memory back when you go into something. So you can effectively for 5 go into your Magna X because you digivolve for 2 into a Magna or an armor form, and then you digivolve for 3 with the option into your Magna X. And sometimes just having a big unaffected wall that can also beat your opponent to death without being interacted with just wins you the game. The hit makes sense, and honestly, it may push Vaccine Armor more towards Rapidmon X or running a proper amount to level 5 so that they can actually abuse the Magnamon X. It's going to take some time for people to brew and see what the real result is going to be. I think the Rapidmon X may be run a little bit over Magnamon X, but people may just decide that the slots that you lose from Awakening are good to just slot like Angelomon Ace and other things into. So we'll see. If you have any brews for that, show them to me. I'd love to see them. Blue is still going to be in a strong spot though, because even if they have to spend the memory to go into the Magnamon X from Magnamon, you're in a good place once you have Magnamon X on the board. So this affects you less. You just get less quick acceleration early, and you have to put your opponent to a pretty high amount of memory. So, Numon X. Basically, the slugs had to pay for their crimes somewhat. As much as Ukon being limited would probably put the deck in line with other tier 1 decks, due to them being a huge meta relevant threat from BT-15 straight to BT-18 in the JP meta, this is the correct hit to not fully kill the deck and punish it somewhat so that it's not like at the top of the table until something even more oppressive comes along. While I think it probably would have still been like not the top of the top tier with just the Ukon limited, I think that Numon X being limited probably puts it into like tier 1.5. So while Ukon and Louis hits were potentially enough to bring it into line with everything else, it's been too present for too long, and Numon's X's ability to float into anything from the deck other than the Monzes is one of the more annoying things that the deck can do, especially going into Platinum, and then Platinum can immediately go into Shine, which is one of the things that they brought up in their post. Numon X's limit, in addition to Ukon, will make those who play the deck have to focus more on the control gameplay style over immediate rushdown, and will make it more of a tempo deck instead of an aggro deck, where you're running the newer Garamons that do security attack -1. I know that JP was doing that to an extent, and you'll have to focus more on like control via Valk and also in future with the Shadow Sarathi Ace, instead of just beating them to death with Ukon and Numemon so quickly. A lot of people were clamoring for Monze X to be hit, though the deck continues to function somewhat with Numemon X and Ukon limited. The deck is dead entirely if Monze X is limited, and they don't like fully killing decks, so it makes more sense to hit this. The deck cannot run without Monzemon X. It can run somewhat without Nume X. It's still good, but it's not like meta defining good like it was previously. So, if you've watched my video on the ban list, you'll know that I think they should have hit Patamon instead of TK. But this ban makes more sense because of the way that they like to do game design philosophy, though I personally disagree with it because of other things that they've stated on previous ban lists. So while I think that Patamon should have been the card eliminated due to its limiting future design space, and that's a reason that they give for a lot of things that they hit with the ban list, because this, like, Patamon limits feature design space for level 4 vaccines and tamers that modulate security. This is a good hit so that they don't completely mess with the Great Angels decks and also the yellow gimmick decks that abuse Patamon engine. TK could have been more fair if he was a 4 or 5 cost, but basically, effectively for 2, you take a card off of security and then set it up for a Patamon play. And you gain a memory anytime a card is added to security. So even though he costs 3, he actually costs 2. And then now Patamon has to actually high roll security for free Digivolutions, which makes it more fair as a card. Though it's still going to lead to some free wins on high roll like Beelsmon decks used to do, because it is just kind of a sacky win con if they actually get what they're going for. But, we'll see how the deck continues. I stated before, I think it potentially could go more towards Rapidmon X, but it's still going to be a deck. It's just less consistent than it was previous. And now we get to the unrestricted Gabumon ST6. This is one of the cards that I thought should be unlimited in my video on the ban list. Gabumon X ST6 is back, and honestly, it should have been since ST16 came out. Gabumon ST6 is identical to the Gabumon ST16, other than it being vanilla when it's on board. ST16 gains you a memory at the start of your main if your opponent has a Digimon, and this Digimon does the exact same thing, but doesn't have that. So it doesn't make sense why ST16 was allowed and ST6 was still limited in any capacity. It's a welcome addition back, as much as I don't think that Melga decks are really gonna pop up from it. It does help with draw discard strategies, and I would have loved to see Greymon X back, as well as a few of the other things from my unban suggestions in my ban list video. But I'm happy to see it back. I think that they should unlimit some more things, and I'd like to see them do more of that in the future. So, my predictions for the future of the meta. This section, I just want to let you know my thoughts. It's going to be accurate for only about 2 weeks until we get to EX7, though it's probably going to be accurate after that, because I don't think that anything from EX7 is going to shake up very much other than Lilith X and potentially a few tier 2 decks, but we're going to see what happens with that, because we're going into a format that Japan didn't see at all. Stuff may be slightly different. Ancient Garu is in an extremely strong place after the ban list. While Ukamon's now limited and Hammerspark was used in some versions, it can largely do its thing still with a few substitutions, and I think it's probably going to be the best deck in the format. And then blue-based Magnamon X, I thought was tier 1 previously, but it only really got hits in the form of Hammerspark and Awakening. And it can largely do exactly the same thing as before, with now a less oppressive Numemon interaction with it. Because previously, the big way to out it was to Monze exit to death, and then on their upkeep it would just go. And now that's not going to be a thing that people are going to run into very often. So it's still in a good spot. Imperial is on the list in basically the exact same place that I put it previously. You're still going to see it. It got no hits. I know that some versions were using Hammerspark, but it wasn't entirely common. So it's just going to function as it did previously. I think that Dorugoramon, or Dex Dorugoramon, is now tier 1, even though previously I had it the top of tier 1.5. It has a really strong matchup into most everything, except for Omnimon. It has a really bad matchup into Omnimon, but it's entirely pilot focused. Into the top decks, it has a 50-50 matchup if you know what you're doing and you don't miss your triggers. The biggest problem with the deck is knowing how to play black stall kind of gameplay while also doing purple combo stuff. And if you can do both of those, or get good at both of those, and you know what you're doing, you have a 50-50 chance into most of the top stuff. I think the Omnimon deck is the thing that it has the biggest problems with, and you can have a lot of problems against blue Magnamon base if you miss your triggers or you aren't sure what you're doing. I've lost to that deck quite a bit with it, but it's a learning experience. This is one of the decks that you kind of have to grind to know what you're doing, but it's really pilot focused, but I do think that it's a tier 1 deck if you can figure out what you're doing with it. Numon, I think, is now tier 1.5. It's a really strong control deck, but it is a control deck. And Omnimon, I think, is at the same level or maybe slightly better than Numemon, depends on the player. But Omnimon has some really, really strong protection and also an extremely strong wipe that it can do. Though once Omnimon is on the board, it just kind of sits there. It doesn't have any protection or really any way to deal with it. Though Alter B is extremely oppressive as a way to remove 3 security and just get game. It has a lot of kind of toolboxy things. The real issue is it loses to not seeing the necessary pieces to do stuff. And if they don't have the options on board, then if they don't get into the Omni, it's really, really easy to take apart. Um, I think that Tyrant is in a pretty decent spot now, though the big problem is that blue base Magna is just immune to all of the things that Tyrant does, and Tyrant takes a lot longer to set up than a lot of the really good decks are. So I think if you grind it, you may see some success, but I think it's more for people who want to like do a control gameplay style. The new promo helps the deck quite a bit with some of the aggro that it was missing, but that card is expensive, so we'll see on that. I think that Armor Vaccine is now pretty solidly in the middle of tier 1.5. It's a kind of sacky high roll deck in the same way that Beals was after the Impmon got limited. It's still really good, but we have yet to see brews with it going forward. I know that at my local yesterday, a person who was running one with the ban list versions ended up getting top 4, and my local is extremely competitive. So it's still a good deck, but I think that you need to just see your stuff and not go against decks that you have a hard time with, and you'll do okay. But again, it's kind of a sacky high roll deck. Gallantmon's good. People who no life that deck are seeing a lot of really good like experiences with it. And Shine, I think, is still good. I am seeing Ancient Gray a bit more frequently, and I think that it's pretty good. I'm not sure where I'd put it exactly. It's probably top of tier 2, but it could be tier 1.5. It mostly depends on the player and also how they're rolling it out, but it is also hurt by the Ukon Man limit. So we'll see with that. But yeah, that's about it for my predictions for the meta. I, may be wrong. This is just my predictions. I am a pretty competitive player and I play in one of the more competitive areas, but it's still just my predictions. You may have different ones. I know that other people are going to do videos or have ideas, so let me know what you think. I'd love to hear. Honestly, thank God for Banlist. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad to see it. Please like and subscribe and share with your community or friends who are getting into the competitive scene. From everyone I've talked to, they seem pretty satisfied with the ban list. And while I'm of the opinion that Patamon should have been hit, making it a high roll deck instead of a consistent monster is a fair trade off for now. We'll see what happens as more level 4 vaccines and tamers are printed in the future, but who knows? Now, blue is in a really strong spot after the ban list, and if you enjoy black and purple shenanigans, Dexter Goramon is in a pretty strong spot to work its way into the meta for the next handful of sets. So yeah, that's about it. My Twitter and Twitch are LainTCG. Now that the sim is updated, I'll probably be streaming a little bit more. My model is by Be a Big Shot or Arabiataho on Twitter. My banner is by Yo-Yoms on Twitter, and my logo is by Pinky Bird on Twitter and VGen. Thank you for watching if you got this far, and I hope you have a nice day, and good luck in your locals.